And hello, everyone, and welcome into Tigers Tonight. I do remember how to do this, I think. It's been a while. Battled COVID and had a lot of other stuff, and yet here we are. We are back and better than ever live tonight. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button if you love the show. That helps us get more views. And as always, by the best co-host in all the land, we will start with our friend from Jersey. Actually, I'm going to mix it up tonight. Our friend Brian Moss. Brian, how in the world are you?
Doing pretty good. It's starting to get warmer a little bit. I think it was in the 50s today, so I had some shorts on, so you can't complain.
Wow, rolling in the shore. I know.
I was sweating. It was in the 50s, man. I'm telling you.
Oh, and before we get into this, I do want to give my thoughts to all the people. Man, the last couple of weeks have been terrible weather-wise. All the folks affected by the tornadoes. When Arkansas just decimated. The pictures of the high school were just heartbreaking. Covington, Tennessee, Adamsville, Tennessee, ended up with 3 unfortunate deaths in Memphis from straight line winds.
And they were straight lines.
yeah. Well, the one that came by my house that missed me by about a mile and a half was actually headed directly for my house and then just turned left. And thank goodness. But just thoughts going out to all those people. And boy, just a tough few days weather-wise. It just seemed like everywhere. That was a long day. But still in the palatial Marley Manor in beautiful, scenic, and crime-free Hernando, Mississippi, the one and only Larry Marley. Larry, how are you, sir?
I'm great, and only because we're taping on Wednesday is that the case, because yesterday I would have been out of town. But yes, and your house and my house are very close. So yeah, those storms last Friday night were no joke. I mean, no joke. And yeah, it was scary. Most of the time, you and I talked about this, John. Most of the time when we get a storm like that, we're just ticked off that, our favorite TV show gets interrupted by, the local, weather guy. Right. But, and I think you mentioned this, Friday just had a different feel to it.
Stuff.
Right. It felt different. I don't know why, but it did. And win Arkansas, home of D'Angelo Williams, by the way, if you don't know that. And so that football field that you saw decimated, that was the field that D'Angelo Williams played high school football on, as far as I know. I don't know if they got a new one, but as far as I know, that's the same one. So
the school was in the same place. And I just talk about just tough. But hey, want to congratulate you on the half marathon. How about that? The Hattiesburg half.
Yes, I think this was my 30-something, I don't remember, half marathon. I've got all my medals in the back over there hanging up. And so, yes, thank you. It was, I had a little trouble on mile 11 because it had been, as you know, John, it's been sort of cool and dry. This spring, we really haven't had a whole lot of humidity. Well, let me tell you something. It was humid in Hattiesburg on Saturday, and so I had not really had trained and all that. So my brother-in-law is Army strong. He just retired from the Army. I am not Army strong, and so it was quite the challenge. But thank you very much. But let's talk. So we're spring practice started a couple of weeks ago, and we haven't had a show since spring started.
Yeah. And by the way, I still stand by my statement of if you ever see me running, you should run too because somebody's chasing me. All right. So let's get into it on the defensive side of the football. We covered the offense a couple weeks ago. Spring practice will actually wrap up a week from Friday. You're watching this. We're recording this on Wednesday night. So I know 2 weeks, isn't it, Brian? Isn't it 2 weeks? The 21st, I believe, is the spring game, if memory serves.
I believe so, without checking. Yeah, I think 21st sounds about right. I guess we could check.
It's the 21st.
Yeah.
Yep.
So a little bit about spring practice and how it works. You get 15 days. So not everybody has their spring game at the same time, and not everybody, or 15 practices, and not everybody practices every day. Some schools practice every day for 2 weeks, and then they're done. Memphis, Coach Silverfield likes to spread it out. Mike Norvell was that way. They just like to spread it out. They'll tell you it prevents injuries, keeps for me, it keeps kids from getting burned out too early because, spring spring practice is one of those things. It's a time for new coaches to kind of install things and to kind of see where newcomers are and see where kids that have transferred in, how they fit, and to see where folks have improved. I mean, that's the other thing. You want to see improvement, obviously, from year to year. But I focused on offense a couple weeks ago. So tonight we're going to move more into special teams and defense. We will start with the defense. And Brian, I don't ever recall this defensive line being as deep as it is this year. A lot of guys, a lot of size along that defensive line too.
There is a lot of size, and you're replacing. You're going to have a new nose tackle, a new defensive tackle. But the guys coming in, one that comes to mind, and Darius Jones. I think he was a 4-star coming out of high school, so you could probably pencil him as one of the starters there. But you have, plenty of guys that can, fill in the role. Some of the ones that like Zy Brockington, I think he's going to be a junior this year, so he has a chance to step up and possibly play, a bigger role. So, I mean, there's definitely a lot of opportunity, and there's a lot of excitement because of how much, defensive line, has improved. And I mean, just overall defense, just every category when you take a look at it. The total defense, rushing defense, passing defense, and scoring defense, every one of those improved from 2021 to last year. So, I mean, and you keep your same defensive coordinator going forward. I mean, it's going to be, very fun to watch this defense this year, because I think these kids are hungry. I think they see the opportunity that's in front of them. And, I know I'm here up north. I haven't been at practice, but the folks that I've talked to have all said this practice has been very spirited, and they just, from everything that I hear, everyone is loving what they see so far throughout the whole practice, but specifically on this defensive line. They are hungry, and I'll just say, watch out, because you have Hamilton and Allen coming back on the edges. This year could be very fun to watch.
Yeah, and Jalen Allen, Larry, he's a guy that I think he's probably the key to the defense this year, because he's a guy that can cover a little bit. He can play with his hand down or his hand up. And I like to hear that guys are spirited, especially along the defensive line, because as you know from playing, most players don't really like spring practice that much, but they can think of 1,000 things. But yeah, you got guys like Jalen Allen, William Whitlow, like just so much, a lot of experience. This is one of the few sides of the defense where you have a ton of experience coming back.
Right. And you mentioned Jalen Allen because one of the things that Barnes likes to do is confuse quarterbacks. And one of the things you do is you keep your ends standing up. He doesn't know if they're going to rush or if they're going to drop into coverage. And so we actually talked about this last year, that we see a lot of that in Ohio State, what Ohio State did when he was there. And we saw that this year in passing situations where you would see the ends actually standing up without their hands down, and they would drop into coverage, and you would do a zone blitz or things like that. So you're right. A guy like Jalen Allen, who was a redshirt senior, this is 5th year. I mean, this is a guy who's seen it all and done it all at this point. And so you're right. A lot of the veterans, spring practice is not their favorite thing. But what you try to do in spring is just sort of knock the dust off of the off season and see where you're at. If there's anything you need to work on in the summer, and also if you've been working in a certain area, see how you've improved. I remember one year I really worked on tackling in the off season. And come spring practice, I could feel like, all right, yes, I'm a lot stronger and I'm able to tackle better. And I felt a lot better going into the summer about that. So this is a time for veterans to build confidence and for your younger players to establish their spot on the 2 deep chart. That's what the spring is all about, especially when you're talking about depth here. You mentioned William Whitlow. I guess a redshirt sophomore right here. This is a guy who can come in and say, hey, look, I'm going to put my stamp. I am going to get some snaps this year. And this is, and this spring is a time when he can really show, hey, look how much I've improved.
I tell you, one of the things I like, Brian, you mentioned Hamilton and Allen. it's such an advantage to have guys on the edges that are 6'3", and because they can. One thing that bothers quarterbacks more than anything, obviously, you never want to get sacked, obviously, or hit. But if you can get hands up and you can just kind of get hands in the passing lane, that's huge for a defense like Memphis, especially as you said, because look down, just looking at the roster, and I haven't had a chance to go to practice yet either, but you've got Zybe Rockington, 6'1", 290, Josh Ellison, 6'3", 300, Derek Hunter Jr., 6'5", 265, like Hamilton, 6'3", Jalen Allen, 6'3", AJ Odom, 6'3", like all these guys, Josh White, all these guys are 6'3" and 6'4", and that's just such a huge advantage along the defensive front.
He's muted. You're muted.
Sorry about that. But yeah, I like the length and the depth, because when you take a look at the schedule this year, I mean, it really sets up nicely for the Tigers. And you have, when you really do have a Power 5 level type offensive defensive line. Now, I mean, they still have to perform like it, but on paper, I mean, this is a very good offensive and defensive lines. So going into this year, and you take a look at the teams that the Tigers will be playing, I think that's why Tiger fans can be very excited about this season, because you see some of these matchups. I mean, I think that's why everyone's bullish on. All of us here have predicted at least 10 wins. But I'm very excited to see Jalen. I don't have I was trying to get his stats up in front of me, but my browser was freezing on me. But so I just think he can have a very productive season. How many tackles and sacks? Can you guys pull that up?
From last
year?
You're
muted. Yeah, from last year.
Oh, my goodness. Well, you put me on the spot here.
Yeah, give me just a second here. Let's see. Jalen Allen last year had,
wow. Let's see.
That's not right. He had an interception last year. They returned for 39 yards. He had 58 tackles, 10 tackles for loss for minus 42 yards and 5 sacks. 2 straight seasons he's had 5 sacks. The interception, 2 passes defended, and he forced a fumble last year. So, yeah, he's a guy now, Brian, to your point, it's time for him to take that next step and maybe have 75 tackles and 15 tackles for loss. He's so disruptive along that defensive line.
And I keep going back to the schedule, because I think this is the type of schedule. It's not as hard as it was last year, right. And it sets up nicely for him, a defensive end, to have that. What was it, Martin Affetti type season? Didn't he have like 11, 12 sacks or something?
Yeah, something like
effect?
That.
So to me,
2013.
It was around there. I just feel, because of this schedule and the experience that's coming back on the defensive line, that Coach Pope says, fast. Was it fast and violent or fast and furious or whatever?
Fast and violent,
saying is. I really think that this is, you're really going to see the defensive line that he envisioned when he first got here.
And that's another key to me is, we talk about this a lot with coaching, continuity. And, having that same voice back that you had last year, like that's one thing we talked about with the offense that could be a little bit of a struggle, is different voices in that room, special teams, a different voice. But to have your defensive staff back in a defense that got so much better last year, and just as the year went on, just looked better. And to your point, I haven't just torn into the schedule, but we're going to be bigger than every team we play, just about, except for maybe probably be bigger than us. But we're going to be, like you said, I mean, we've got a bunch of P5 transfers. We're going to be big, and that, that's only going to serve us well. All right, so that the defensive line. Let's move to linebacker. And, to me, this is Jeff Canton-Arcu's linebacker core. Yep. He's a guy that really came on towards the end of the year last year. But Brian, he's kind of got to be that leader, I think, or Larry, we'll go to you. He's kind of got to be that leader because he's a redshirt senior. and another guy with P5 experience. But I think this is kind of his linebacker core.
Well, and he is the number one returning tackler from this defense, right? And so what you want to see him do, and again, if you look at there's normally there's two main captains, and that is you have the linebacker and down lineman. He makes the calls in that spot. And usually it's the middle linebacker or one of the edge rushers that makes the calls. And then you have the captain of the backfield, right? Whoever it's a safety or a cornerback. And they make all the calls. This is the guy that needs to step up and going, okay, he's a redshirt senior. This is my team. This is my front. I'm going to make these calls. And he needs to have a huge year for this defense to be effective. He's the guy. He doesn't necessarily have to make all the plays, but he's got to make the right calls. He's got to make that. And we need him to take control and say, okay, this is what I want you to do. So when you walk up as a defense, one of the things I guess a lot of people understand, or maybe they don't. So when you walk up, you have a defensive scheme, right? But the offense is going to come out and they're going to be in a specific formation. So you have to make a call based on what that formation is. So if you've got a blitz call, but they're lined up in such a way that you have to change that call. And that's his job. And it's an important role. And one of the things you saw, guys, this year, and we talked about it, how the defense got better. It became almost seamless. The other team would come out. We were ready for it. We switched right into the correct defense, and we saw that over and over and over. Now, again, I know we didn't play very well offensively in certain times this year, but defensively, I thought towards the end of the year, especially against SMU, I thought that was probably defensively one of the best games we played all year. I really do.
Brian, and I think another guy who's looked pretty good this spring and who needs to step up, Sincere Evans. He's another guy that came in from a P5. Actually Coastal Carolina, although I think he started at Cincy, I think, but he guy that I think is another key to the defense.
Yeah, I think he'll have an opportunity to step up, but I think the player he'll be battling with is Andrew Jones. He's going to be a redshirt sophomore this year. If I'm not mistaken, he's a former 4-star on Rivals. So Andrew Jones is who I'm looking forward to really step up and get some playing time this year. Because I think everyone knows Arku is going to he's slotted in as a starter. There's no question there. So your other two linebacker spots, I have Chandler Martin, the ETSU transfer coming in. I think he's a phenomenal player. So you can give that one of the starting spots to him. But yeah, Evans and Andrew Jones will definitely be battling out for it. And there's a plenty of, and Davian Mayo, who had
Mayo. I was about to mention him.
He had some playing time last year. So
Mayo
there's definitely
in certain spots last year. He really, really did.
Yeah. So there's Carmelo Overton is a true freshman that the staff was very high on and very excited that he signed at Memphis. So there's talent there. There's depth. There's a lot of depth on the linebacking core. But we'll see who starts. But to me, as of right now, I would actually have Jones, Arku, and Martin because all three of them can fly. All three of them are smart, high IQ, and just like the defensive line. I'm really excited about this defense because of Matt Barnes. Matt Barnes and Jordan Hankins, continuity again. Just you kept everything the same, and you're just plugging. You're not rebuilding. You're just plugging in, plug and play. And yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Well,
it's going to be exciting.
Ryan, don't you think he sort of he figured out who he likes in certain spots to play his defense, right?
Mm-hmm.
And look, I'm not going to throw any aspersions.
I think that's a huge key. I think you're right, Larry. I think Matt kind of figured out who he trusted and what guys. Because the thing about a coach, especially because to me, it all starts up front, right? And we've talked about this ad nauseum over the years. If you can't get pressure, then that causes the linebackers to have to help, which then causes puts the secondary on an island. Or if they're in zone, now these guys have to cover for 5 seconds. but it all starts up front. But I think he's finally figured out, okay, this is on 3rd and 11. These are my guys on 3rd and 4. And it gets that granular, 3rd and 4, 3rd and 5.
Yep.
I had a defensive coach tell me one time, the worst possible scenario is 3rd and 6. Like that, it does not get any worse, because 7 and longer is probably a pass and 5 and shorter is a run. But I think that's something Matt Barnes did a great job of.
Yep.
Where to put guys. So
that's right.
We moved to the secondary, although I hesitate to put Zay Collins in the secondary because he was kind of a linebacker, although he was more of a hybrid. But Brian, this is a group that some guys have something to prove. Because if you lost a lot at any position, it's this defensive backfield.
And if there's any question mark anywhere on the defense, it's a secondary. Because in my opinion, you only got 2 guys that I can, as of right now, that I would say I would pencil in at starting. Greg Rubin at quarterback. I think he's done enough, and I think he's definitely improved. And Simeon Blair, the transfer from Arkansas, I believe it is, who started a bunch of games. Those 2 are the only 2. When I take a look at what's back in the secondary, those are the only 2 I can say those are my starters. And that's you still have another safety and another cornerback that you need to find who's going to be your guys.
And you've got the transfer from Ohio State, Jalen Johnson. I don't know what he's I don't know.
Yeah, I just don't know too much about him.
We don't know anything about him, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we know that he got recruited to Ohio State, which we've talked about that, right?
Right.
You don't just accidentally end up on the roster at Ohio State. Like that's, you got to be able to play at some point. That doesn't mean, look, we had a guy transfer from Tennessee though. He was fast as the wind, but couldn't spell cat if you spot him a C and T. Okay, so I mean, so and I'm not saying anything about this young man. I'm saying that guy. But so I don't know. Like I don't know if he's going to be. But I know he played at Ohio State. So, but you're right. If we've got a weak spot, I shouldn't say a weak spot, but a question mark, it is the secondary, because we certainly don't have the depth on the secondary that we do on the front 7. We don't. And we don't have any of the proven players that we have in the last 2 years in safety and at cornerback. You've got
and
Reuben. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna, and then all the categories. Even though it's improved, the pass defense was improved. It was still 89th, so it's still not great.
Right. If you have an area that needs the most improvement, it's the secondary as well. So now having a good pass rush always helps that. But the truth is, at some point,
you got to cover
people. You got to cover people. And the other thing the secondary has got to do that we did not do a great job of last year is getting people on the ground. Because guys are good. Look, they're going to make plays. But if you keep them in front of you and you get them on the ground, hey, make them march down the field. How many times, John, have we talked about make teams drive the ball? Because eventually, if you make them keep making plays, they're going to make a mistake. Teams are going to make a mistake. It's going to happen. And so the objective on defense is, sure, get negative plays when you can, every time you can, but keep the guy in front of you and get him on the ground. That if we do that in the secondary, guys, we're going to have a really good defense this year. I'm telling you, if they just focus on that.
2 guys have to step up for me. Julian Barnett and Davion Ross. We really need both those guys to step up in some way, whether it's special teams, whether it's, nickel situations, but those 2 guys have to step up. Also interesting to me, and Darius Coffey is no longer in the overcrowded running back room. Apparently I'm the only person in the city that's not on scholarship to play running back at Memphis. He's positioned really well.
Go ahead.
No, and that's.
I was just going to say, like, what's funny is you will find that running backs make great defensive players, and I literally, you would think it'd be wide receivers. It's not, because wide receivers,
because they can't catch,
and they don't like to hit. They don't like to hit anybody. But
well, it
sorry,
would be nice if
I'm sure there's some wide receiver that's going to come over and knock the crap out of me tonight. But the truth is, they don't like to hit anybody. But running backs, man, they make great safeties, and they just do, like, because they like to knock the crap out of people.
Well, they need to just leave Coffee at a position, because they had him on defense and they moved him to running back. Now he's back at defense. I mean, at some points, like, I mean, are you not necessarily are you wasting his talents, but he's got to develop into something. Stick him somewhere and stick to it. Give the kid a chance at somewhere.
Joe Norwood's another guy that redshirt senior, played at New Mexico Military Institute. He's another guy. So I think I think we all agree that the talent is there, but you've got to do something. Like, you've got to, you've got to show me. That's why, Davion Ross is a guy, fast as lightning, 5'10", good size, but you got to cover somebody. Julian Barnett, 6'2", 190, transfer from Michigan State. Like, this is the year for him. Like, this is the year. Like, this is the time that he has to step up and show why Mississippi State recruited him, or why Michigan State recruited him. Greg Rubin had the sophomore slump of all sophomore slumps last year. Didn't get thrown out a lot, didn't make a lot of plays. I'm like,
but there's also there's some kids. How often do we hear the best recruiting class ever, and then the following year, best recruiting class ever? Some of these kids needs to really step up, but they need the opportunity, and I think this is the opportunity this year, because like Tyrell Raby, I think he I haven't been at practice, but from the folks who have and talked to me, he's having or I should say, like I said before, everyone's excited about the defense, but Raby is one that the talent is definitely there. So
absolutely.
And Trey, mentioned in the chat, DJ Bell.
DJ Bell, yeah.
And I know the staff was very high on DJ when he was coming out of high school. So lots to look at.
And this is what we talked about at the beginning of the show, is that a guy like DJ Bell, spring is his showcase, because he's going to get a chance.
The third. There's you another guy.
Yeah. I mean,
at some point, these guys that have been around, Brian, you make a great point about best recruiting class, but at some point, these guys that have been around a while, they got to do something. I'm not picking on him, because he's one of my favorite interviews ever. But a guy like Julian Barnett, like, all the talent in the world, but he reminds me a lot of Joe Skates on offense, right? He's just, sometimes his head's not in the game, and this is the chance, Larry. You're absolutely right. This is the chance for guys to step up, because everything with no Quindell Johnson, no Zay Cullins, everything on the defensive side of the ball is wide open. Greg Rubin, great player, had a rough year last year. He should be the leader of that defense. He's a quiet guy, and I don't know their personalities well enough, except for Jalen. Quiet. They're not big rah-rah guys, but somebody is going to have to step up and be a vocal leader of this defense, especially in that secondary. And somebody's got to step up, like I think, Larry, you said about Jeff Canton, Arku. This is my secondary.
Right.
These are my guys.
What we're going to do. And
this is what we're going to do.
And so one of the things that's funny, people, if you watch defense, because everybody sees the offense huddle, right? And we don't always huddle, because we're running, spread or whatever. But when they do huddle, like, everybody's looking at the quarterback, right? Well, the defense doesn't do that. The defense, they get together, the down linemen and the linebackers are usually kind of standing around, kind of staring at each other, and the cornerbacks and the safeties are sort of off in the back, right? But they're all talking to each other, and we're yelling at each other what we need to do. Somebody's got to step up and go, trips left, trips left, and then you call out your defense. We used to say Buffalo. So I would say trips left, Buffalo, and everybody would know, okay, this is the coverage based on what we've got. And somebody's got to do that. Somebody has got to be that guy to step up and go, okay, here's the defense we're in. We've got 5 defensive backs. They're in 5 wide, so we're going to go man with a cover guy over the top, something like that. Right? That's what you've got to do. And guys, if we talk about the defense, the spring, and I'm going to be really watching this in the spring game. What does their communication look like on the back end of that defense? Because if we start seeing busted coverages, that's when we're going to start going, wow, they've really got to tighten up that communication.
All right, let's move on. Group special teams, the specialist, as they're called. Memphis carrying one kicker on the roster this spring, and that's Noah Grant. And Brian, that's a guy that was up and down last year. Didn't have to kick field goals, didn't have to kick extra points. And I like to say we kid Larry about it, but it is a third of the game. And for a team like Memphis, where 2 years ago it cost us games, last year we won some games. So you got to be able to kick the football. And Noah Grant would kick it 3 times in the end zone and then 2 times out of bounds. But there's no margin this year. He's the guy.
Well, no, I think Alex Rayner, he's not here yet. He'll come in May, I believe. The Georgia Southern
he's not here
kicker.
yet. That's right. Yeah.
Right, he's not here
So,
yet.
but to me, he's the one that's going to be the guy at kicker. And is it Reed Bauer, the punter from Arkansas? To me, those two are going to be your guys. But Memphis has got spoiled at place kicker for a field goal kicker for a long time. And, we talked about it before. Even when Memphis was bad, back in the early 2000s, it was, or I'm sorry, 2010s, they still had a solid kicker. And it's something Memphis usually has always had is solid special teams. And, we'll see what the kid from Georgia Southern can do. I haven't seen him kick, but from his film, he looks decent. And Memphis is going to need a good special teams this year.
This is a biggie, right, guys? Because we talk about this schedule being winnable, right? A winnable schedule, but we're going to need a kick at some point in this season to win a game. It's going to happen. And it's going to kill me because that's what it is to me.
And it may not be a, when you say need a kick to win a game, a lot of people think 40-yard field goal at the horn. I'm thinking Memphis is up 20-13 with 3.5 minutes left. They drive down, run it down to a minute and a half, and need a 36-yard field goal to put you up 10. That's
ice the game.
That's where guys mess up sometimes. Is it's not always about just like, not gonna get on it, but just like officiating. Oh, that last, the Kendrick Davis timeout thing cost Memphis the game. No, Memphis basketball lost that game because they got out rebounded by Florida Atlantic. And the same thing with kickers, right? It's not always that last kick. And Jeb brings up a great point. You just can't have your kicker lose you a game. Right. And that happens. And because what it does, what the kicker, why it's so important is it changes how you call a game from an offensive standpoint. Yep. It's midway through the second quarter. You go up 19-13. Your kickers missed 2 field goals and an extra point. Well, now you have to go for 2. And so now you're still stuck at 19-13 midway through the fourth quarter. And you really needed that point, but you just couldn't trust your guy to go out there. And to me, it is the one position on the field, except maybe quarterback, but to me personally, it is the one position on the field that absolutely requires the coach to 100% trust you. Because more often than not, and kicking is also one of those things that shows up, like I said, early in a game. Jeff.
Yes. So field position, because
what you were talking about.
Field position, right? Field position is right.
What you're talking about, where make a team drive down the field, it's easier to do that when somebody's starting at the 20, 25-yard line versus the 35 or 40 because you shanked the ball out of bounds.
You know what? You know what's funny? People get all hung up on a punter kicking a punt into the end zone and instead of downing it at the 2. Downing it at the 2 is great. Like, that's awesome. Like, and you always want to win that field position game. But I don't mind a punt going into the end zone. Especially if you're punting from like your own 40 or something or 50 or, and you kick it into the end zone, that's fine because they still got to go 80 yards. And if I can't stop them in 80 yards, that's on me. The bottom line is, don't shank that punt. Don't kick that ball 18, 19 yards and have them starting at the 37. That's what we can't do. Put it in the end zone. Go for it. In fact, kicking it to the end zone, they can't return it. That's great. Like, we'll just start at the 20 and we'll move on with our lives. It's funny that playing field position sounds so boring, and it is to a degree. But at the end of the day, if you can make the other team start at the 20 or 25 on every drive, you will win most of your games. Period. End of story.
And Brian, as we wrap up special teams here, the other thing that's got to improve for Memphis, and I don't want to get into because it's impossible to know who's going to play where and when, but the biggest problem for me last year, and maybe the last 2 years with Memphis, has been coverage.
Yep.
And, to what Larry's talking about, guys, starting at the 38-yard line because they had a 20-yard kickoff return versus starting at the 16.
I mean, coverage cost us the Houston game.
Yeah, that's the thing on
in
special. We had that game won. And to me, Brian, that's almost as important as the guy kicking the football.
And Memphis has a new special teams coach, so I think a lot of the stuff you've seen the past 2 years, should improve because I think there's more emphasis on attention to details now with this new coach. We'll see, but I think Memphis is in a better place with special teams.
We'll see.
Yeah,
short and sweet. But there's a reason why there's a new special teams coach. I mean.
Right.
Same thing with wide receivers when we
coaches,
talked last week.
Right. The 3 position coaches we exchanged are the guys that it needed fixing. I mean, it wasn't that, this guy got this job and this guy, it was more fixed.
Yep.
And, you go out and you get a special teams coach. And again, you want every possession to end with a kick. That's the goal, is every single possession to end with a kick of some kind, whether that's a punt, field goal, or a kickoff, punt or kickoff. You want every possession to end with a kick. And you talk about spoiled. Memphis has had great punters over the years too. But the kicking game is also the only position to me that is like, there has been no position that has benefited more from a transfer portal than kickers, because they are true. They have a job. Yes, they have calls and yes, they have their snap count, but like, they have a job, and their job is to go out and kick the ball as far and as high as they possibly can. And that's it. And not anybody can do that, but it's easy for a guy like Reed and punt because that's his thing, is punt. Now he has to get used to coverages and direction, but he's been directional kicking his whole career. So it's not like he has to come in and learn a bunch of terminology. He just comes in and does his job. And I think punting and kicking, I am interested in kicking, obviously, but I'm really interested to see how punting works out because, talk about spoiled. You had a guy like Joe Doyle who was versatile. And, 2 years ago, people malign the Memphis kicking game. Well, part of that's because you had a damn punter doing a lot of the kicking.
Yep.
And, early in the season, that was fine. But as the season went on, it became a problem. But, Reed Bauer's job is going to be to punt the ball down the field. And because the offense, at some point, you would obviously love more than anything the offense to score every time. Well, that's not going to happen because there's 11 guys on the other side of the ball that are good.
Yep.
and are going to stop you from time to time, or you're going to make mistakes or whatever.
Or both.
But, you know, you got to have that punter again late in a game. You're up 20-13. There's 2.5. There's a minute and 45 to go. The other team has no timeouts. You're punting from your own 46-yard line. Your punter has to put that ball inside the 10. That's when you can't afford for it to go in the end zone. And again, it's trust. You know, to me, you should never be punting in plus territory. Like never. There's never a scenario, unless it's fourth and whatever, you know, more than 10 yards. Like you should never punt in plus territory. But late in a game, when you're on your own 45, you got to know, and you got to trust your coverage too, right, Brian? Like you got to trust your guys blocking, because the worst thing that can happen, you know, the other side of this is only average things happen, what they're supposed to do, or bad things happen. Like there's seldom a time where, unless you're kick field goals, where it's like, oh, well, you know, the punter, that was a great, no, he did what he was supposed to do. He pinned him inside the 10. But I'm really curious about punter this year, because I'm really curious to see how Reed Bauer does.
It's to me, special teams this year is going to be the difference. You predicted a 10-win season, and I've said more like an 8-win season. The truth is, secondary and special teams is going to be the difference between those two outcomes. If the defensive backfield comes together and the special teams are at least, if our kicker is as good as our kicker was last year, and we tighten up our coverage and our special teams in general, I think you may be onto something. But those two things, to me, the two things we talked about tonight, the secondary and special teams, that's what's going to tell the difference between a super successful season and a good season next year.
All right. Well, I haven't decided what our topic is next week, so the floor is kind of open this week. We'll figure something out. Huh? Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know yet.
Tell you what,
think about it.
I'll let you guys pick the topic for next week.
All right.
And it's kind of whatever you want to be. And as we go through the summer, we're going to do I promise we're going to do the Why I Coach feature a couple times this summer, because I really want to get Kerrick Jackson on and Stephanie Van Brock. I want to get the new kind of some of the new faces around the program on. And then, of course, we'll have more stuff as we get into the dog days of summer. But that's going to wrap us up for this week. We will be back next week. We'll actually, I think, be back on our regular time next week. We'll be back on Tuesday next week at 7 p.m. Central. Again, reminder, if you like the show, please subscribe and leave us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, wherever in the world you listen.
We're everywhere.
Join us over at Bluff City Media. Right now, of course, we're heavy with the Grizz because they are approaching the playoffs. And my God, one quick, Ja Morant killed 2 people last night. Like that dunk he had last night was probably his best of the season for me, anyway. But Joe Monax and the rest of the guys, Parker Fleming, like they've got the Grizzlies on lock. We've got Lawrence, who's covering 901 FC. We're going to have a couple guys on the showboats. So we've got so much going on over at Bluff City Media. It's bluffcitymedia.co. If you join and use the promo code Tigers Tonight, you join our insiders. You have the Discord. If you use that code Tigers Tonight, you'll save 10% on your first year. It's the best deal.
And by the way, showboats tickets are super cheap. If you haven't looked at them, they're very, very reasonable. I think my season tickets, I got 2 season tickets for $60.
And you get to see QB1. You're going to see Brady White.
You get to see Brady. But all kidding aside, like there's, I know that it's not the NFL, but guys, I mean, come on, it's a lot of fun to just sit out there and watch a game. I mean, it can't be any better than that, honestly. So that's just my personal opinion.
My big thing with, and I don't want to get off on tangents, the reason these leagues mostly don't work is because of quarterback play, because nobody wants to see bad quarterback play. And that's where they struggle, right? Because there's not good quarterbacks in the NFL on every team. So, but to me, it's key that Memphis supports this, because you don't want to be that, we didn't lose the AAF team because we didn't support it. That league was terrible and the league had to fold. Same thing, people may not remember, apparently, although we don't know this, people were born after 1985. I mean, who knew? So they don't remember the Showboats the first go around. We were one of the most successful teams in the league in terms of attendance and in terms of obviously quality of play. We made the playoffs the second year and should have gone to the championship probably. We had Reggie White, we had guys like that, and we were great, but the league folded. So I think this league has a chance, the way they're doing it. And for your special 4-year season ticket with the Showboats, this is not a Showboats podcast, but
yeah, I mean,
Showboats games, you get Houston Gamblers games, because they're doing a really smart thing, and they're putting 2 teams at every station or at each site. So you go out and you get a full day of football, because there's some that are double headers. So you get the full day.
Some you got one day and the next day, right? Jeb's exactly right. I mean, it's a lot of fun, and there's just, and the games are super fast, because it's not an NFL game where it's going to be 3 hours. Like, these games are going to probably take 2.5 hours. I mean, and most of them are on either Friday or Saturdays. So you got plenty of time to enjoy the whole weekend. Or if you're like me, just day drink like all day.
And I was about to say, the best part of this is you get to practice tailgating.
I'll have this down to a Sunday by August. I mean,
just like the players need spring practice, we need practice too with tailgating. So that's going to do it for this week. Thanks to the best co-host in all the land, Larry Marley and Brian Moss. This is John Maddox signing off, and we will talk to everybody next week.